Welcome to the Kennedy Events Podcast, where we feature top marketing, communications, and future of work leaders and share their biggest takeaways and insights. We love these conversations and hope you will too. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Kennedy Events Podcast. I'm your host, Paige Buck. Past guests include Carol Gale of Special D Events, Missy Goldberg of Similar Web, and Julie Liu of F-Point. And today I'm joined by Jack Kosakowski. Jack is the CEO of Creation Agency and has been running the US division for over 6 years now and has grown it to over 7 figures. Their clients range from startups to enterprises. Creation Agency acts as an extension of your team and fills the demand gen gaps for companies looking to execute on social, email, and paid media. Today's episode is brought to you by Kennedy Events. Kennedy Events creates stress-free conferences and events, providing expert management and design for all your corporate event needs, from in-person to hybrid and virtual. You can learn more about us at kennedyevents.com. So welcome, Jack.
Well, thanks for having me.
Very happy to be catching up with you after all this time. Just for our audience, we have had the pleasure of sharing a client for a number of years. And that's where I first got, sparked by all that. I mean, even just the term demand gen was like a big eye opener for me. I was like, wow, here's a whole world I don't begin to understand that can be a make or break piece of the puzzle for a successful event. How did you get started in this?
It's weird. Like, I worked for a marketing automation platform, like a competitor to Hubspot. They were called Acton. And I was actually in sales there, and I sold to so many agency owners in the marketing world that I kind of like had to learn like marketing because I didn't understand what they did. Like, it was really hard to sell the product that I had at the time, or that I was selling at the time. So then I just kind of like made it into marketing somehow. And then it kind of evolved from there. Like, my business partner was actually my biggest client at that company. And then he was like, hey, I want to open up the US division of a, kind of a thriving European market. And I want to kind of transfer over. And so I was like, hey, I've never done this before, but I think I could be good at it. And then here we are, almost 7 years later.
Wow. So, well, always grab the good salespeople. You must, even if sales wasn't going to be your full-time gig, when you see an awesome salesperson, steal them if you can.
Yeah, I mean, I think it helps that I came from sales over to marketing. Actually, I think like it's, made me a better marketer. It makes me a better marketer. I don't know, but it also helps, keep the agency alive, right? Because I can sell and then execute on the marketing side. So yeah, I mean,
you get both sides of it.
Yeah, you got, lived in one world and now I live in the other world. I do miss selling as, I don't do like I used to sell, but that's a whole different conversation.
Nothing wrong with that. And so when you got into this, were events a big part of the mix of what you were trying to sell, or was that a later discovery?
So one of my first my first client that was I honestly, it's not my first client, but it was like one or second or third, and they were community sales called Sales Hacker. And so they were a community for salespeople. And essentially, when we came on, they were doing 1 or 2 webinars a month. I can't remember how many, but anyways, we had to execute on that. So we had to figure out like how to get people to these webinars, because that was kind of how the community paid for itself, because people would, companies would come in, SaaS companies would come in and sponsor the webinars. So we had to like take, he'd sell a webinar. His name is Max Altschuler. He was head of marketing at Outreach for after he left Sales Hacker and sold it to them. But like he taught us a lot about this, because he would sell sponsorships to a webinar, and then we'd have to like execute on them, make sure we hit the right amount of numbers of signups for the for the sponsors, and that kind of evolved. Yeah, that's how we kind of like learned webinars. But I think the biggest challenge for a lot of companies is like, we kind of live in this new world where it's like, don't gate anything, nobody wants to gate anything, which is a very interesting route that we're going. Not to say that I agree or disagree with it. I'm kind of like neutral on it, but you do have to have something at some point when you invest all this time and money into social media. Like, you do have to figure out how to get somebody on your email list, right? So you can communicate with them. And I think, good events, good webinars or in-person events is like the go-to. Like that'll never go away because, when you're giving people like really good information for free, and especially on topics that are very, very relevant, timely, for example, one of our clients does compensation, and there's this new thing called transparency. All the HR executives in certain states are trying to figure this thing out. Like, how else are they going to figure that out, right? Like, there's not a lot of information out on there. So, this company went and they did a series of webinars on it, and like they got 1,000 people to these virtual events to hear about this. And it just so happens that their platform kind of supports this too. But that wasn't what they led with, right? They led with the idea that, hey, come here for this information that you can't get anywhere else. And I don't think we'll ever get away from that.
Right.
So you just have to go to like a seminar to get that information.
Right. So you're demonstrating, it sounds like, first of all, an easy hook is people have a thirst for knowledge in their field, or they have a serious pain point like, oh my God, new HR compliance, new tax compliance. What the heck do we do? Help. And they go seeking information. And when you can provide that, you are positioning yourself as a trusted advisor. And then your agency skill set and like unique sweet spot is finding those people who are expressing that pain point. Like, through all sorts of different web and demand gen tactics that feel, I think, like they are very intangible to people who don't do it or haven't cracked it the way you have.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you just look at marketing in general, like most B2B companies suck at marketing. I mean, they just scream at you about how awesome their product is. And like, we're just kind of desensitized to that.
Yes.
So I think, if you want to get the attention of somebody that could potentially down the road be a customer, how do you do that, right? I mean, if you are, allowing them to come listen to a conversation and get some information that's going to make them better at their job, depends on what your product is. Could be make you better personally, like if you're a life coach, for example, but in most circumstances, the clients that we're working with, they're B2B SaaS companies, and they have to come at things at a different angle. Like they have to bring people into the funnel and introduce to their brand in a different way than just like, hey, here's like some promotional video, here's some blog to read about how cool we are. Like, it just doesn't work like that anymore. So, when you can be the purveyor of truth on a subject that people are really hungry to learn about, and you do that in a way that's not just like saying, hey, buy my product. It's like more like, hey, come in and listen to our executives tell you how to fix your problem that you have. That's the way that marketing, has always been done, but in different ways, like seminars, and people used to have to buy a ticket to a conference. Now you can do that virtually if done right. The problem is just a lot of companies just don't know how to do it, right? And that's typically when they come in and hire a company like us.
So it sounds like you've got HubSpot at the center of a lot of or many of your clients' tech stacks. What else do you add to that to help deliver what on your promises on what you're trying to do for a client?
Well, typically, the reason we like HubSpot is just because it's got all the tools in one place, right? So for example, like if you want to do a webinar, like you've got to, have a service like Zoom. In most cases, that's what a lot of our clients use. And then you've got to plug that into HubSpot, right? And then you've got to be able to get all the data, because one of the things that we measure for a successful event is not how many people sign up. It's great to have 500 people sign up, but it's actually how many of them showed up, what's our show rate? And then the biggest thing is the engagement rate. Like, if we got 100 people to a webinar, 1,000 people to a webinar, if not one of them answered a poll or engaged in the chat or something like that, would be a failure. It's a failure of an event, right? So, online events really are driven by one thing and one thing only anymore. It's like, not only you got to get people to sign up, then you got to get them to show up, but then you got to actually keep them engaged, because there's got to be an endpoint to that webinar or virtual event or whatever that is. That endpoint is typically, hey, what's your CTA? And the only people from a data-driven standpoint that actually come to the finish line of whatever your outcome is, whether that's to book a demo or to get them to download something else, right, after they've attended, you got it all correlates with the engagement rate.
Right. And so you have to have the data. I mean, you have to have the tech on the back end to capture that engagement data.
Correct. Because, the ultimate goal is like, if you're building out a virtual event, just like if you're building out an in-person event, the data around like who signs up, because like you want to keep those people coming back. If I'm not going to quote I can't quote it verbatim because it changes, but like, if it takes 19 touches to get somebody to convert into a demo, for example, if you're a SaaS company, or to get them to convert, it takes 19 trial signups to get them to convert into a paying customer. Like, you have to touch those people a certain amount of time. So like if they just came in through a webinar, like you still have a lot of work to do on the marketing side, which HubSpot allows you to do, right? Like, which is keep in front of those people in a variety of different ways to keep them engaged enough to finally say at one point, light bulb goes off. Like, I need to talk to you guys about what you have to offer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think if I make an analog between this and live events, we're often making the case, and I know you are too, with a live event, like it is one piece of the total mix. And if everybody has an amazing experience that day, got so much out of everything that you offered at that conference, and then they do nothing else, was the event a success? Like, was it? Like, what else do you need from them? What else are you hoping they're doing with you and for you? Are they buying the next piece of your product? Have they extended their life cycle? Have they, gained some?
Are they going to come to the next event? I mean, I think that's the big thing, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're a paid event company. Like,
well, if that event is a revenue generator for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Itself, yeah. Right. Well, yeah. So you were telling me you have a really great story of somebody who went from like a webinar a month to a webinar a day. But how? How could you have that much? What did it look like to scale that?
Yeah. So we work with a company called Sell Better. So John Barrows is the kind of like one of the most recognized sales trainers, I would say, in the world. He works with the largest, tech companies, and he had built something special. And so when we came in, they were doing one webinar a month. They didn't have sponsors. And then we decided that, hey, like, you guys are driving thousands of people to this one webinar a month. Why not do two and get sponsors for it? And then the sponsors get the leads, because, essentially they had all the right people coming to these webinars that the tech companies were looking to sell to. And the tech companies, couldn't find a webinar that would drive those kind of numbers of, engagement wise. And then, now they've gone from, over the past 3 years, went from one webinar a month to 2 webinars a month to 4 webinars a month. Now it's one, we call them live events, but there's one live event a day, which is 20 a month. So,
that's
they have sponsors that sponsor all of these, and we find guests for them. We have to execute on, what's the hook, what's going to drive people to these events. Now they have a team. We work with Sell Better's marketing team. They have a great marketing team, and then we're kind of an extension of them. So we help kind of run the day-to-day stuff in the weeds, make sure that everything's clicking, that they also have hosts that are full-time, so we have to work with the hosts to make sure that they have all the information that they need. I mean, there's just a lot of prep, and then also we have to hit the numbers, right? So they're hitting over 500 people signing up for every day, right? You're averaging over 500 people. So it's
doing that over and over and over again. You got to keep
every day. Yeah.
If you've got the content and the format and the hosts and the sponsors all locked in, outside of that's the event itself. Tell us a little bit more about what demand gen components, what are some of the success ingredients there?
Topics, understanding the audience, building the audience, having a big email list, over time, and just having the right guest topics, email list, and then process, right? Process behind all of that. And then the right email marketing strategy, because, social media only gets you so far, right? So there's different elements to that, which is how do we get new people, a certain amount of new people to come to these events? And then how do we get the right amount of all the people that have been there before back? But then you have this other element of you need to get director and above titles to certain events. There's so many different kind of moving parts for each event. But at the end of the day, if it's good content, people will come back. So
that drives engagement, that drives a desire to show up. You were talking about being, I think we both know this phrase without intrinsically, but to unpack it a little bit, when you act as an extension of somebody's marketing team and you've got a SaaS company with a team of 5 or an entrepreneur with a team of 1.5 driving marketing, they might think, there's no reason I can't do this myself. There's no, this is not rocket science. This is not brain surgery, but maybe they're seeing one of you or 2 of you, but you have like a whole suite of amazing minds and skill sets behind you. What are some of those skill sets?
Well, I think overall you could do webinars at different levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
And most people are just doing a simple webinar. They're not really getting that good of results. But when you really do and build out a good virtual event process, like there's a lot of people behind the scenes, right? Like you have somebody like doing copy, you have somebody doing design, you have somebody doing research, for topics. And then you have somebody that's doing the promotional side on social media, whether that's paid and organic or both. And then you have somebody doing the email marketing side of things and looking at the data to be able to tell you, like, here's the people that we should be sending this to, building out subsets. I mean, there's so many different people with different skill sets that are kind of doing the behind the scenes stuff. And then you have other people that are just managing the relationships because if you're doing, especially if you're doing one show a day, you have a lot of people that you're asking for their time to come on to the show. Just like if you book podcast guests, like if somebody has to make that commitment of 45 minutes, like you're asking five to 10 people a week to make a commitment to you to come on a webinar to give you their knowledge. Like there's a lot of work just in that aspect alone, just like if it was an in-person event.
And that process component gets real important, or you're going to be dropping balls left and right.
Yeah. And so a lot of people just look at, well, that's pretty simple. Like I could do that on my own. Well, maybe you could. I'm not going to say that there's not some marketers out there that can, but it's just very rare to me where I see what we can do and then they come in and internally try to replace us.
Yeah. You're like, good luck with that.
Yeah. And I mean, the agency world, I think if you work with the right agency, like that understands the market and the pricing, the agency should actually be cheaper for what they deliver on. And I think, a lot of clients don't see that. They're like, oh, well, I'm paying X amount of dollars and the only people I interact with are Paige and Jack. Well, yeah, but what you don't realize is that Paige and Jack have a payroll of multiple people that they've essentially turned into experts because they've done such a great job on the process side that like you have to pay for them too to have a really successful event. So, I think that's the hard part for clients is they don't really understand how many people it takes to make something successful. And then really, if you break down the dollar amount of like how many people we're paying behind the scenes, like it's way cheaper for you or it should be. I'm not going to say that because there are agencies that are just like outlandishly expensive. But for us, like I just say, like, listen, we're the price of one San Francisco salary and you're going to get 5 people with that.
Yeah. That's a real strong value proposition. Yeah. And then they've got a whole team of people holding both this process and all of the little pieces on their behalf. To help.
Then, you get a lot of clients that are like, well, I'm scared. Like, I don't want an agency to be owning our internal processes. Like if I want to sell someday. And I'm like, listen, if you're going to sell someday, that's great. Like right before you're going to sell, I'll help you. Like I'm a good enough agency owner that like, if you're really at that point, like I'll help you 3 months before build an internal team so that it looks like, whatever we need to do, we'll get you built. Like, but most clients, they say that and, well, we need to build the internal team just for like sellability. Well, I don't necessarily know if I even agree that a company that comes in and they know an agency is doing a really good job, but that's just part of this game.
That should just also be that can be part of the existing engine, having a really great resource like your agency. I'm curious for you where you see this work going and how you stay on top of trends.
That's a tough one because I'm not like a huge fan of trends, like I see like, oh, all of our clients are like, well, we need to be on TikTok and we need to be, we need to do all these things. And I'm like, well, you're not even doing like the basics, fundamentals the right way. Why would you want to go add something more to, like YouTube is a dark hole for 99% of B2B businesses. Like they don't need to be on YouTube. They just don't. Like like, when's the last time you went to YouTube to like fix a technology problem? Like you just don't, right? You go to YouTube to watch a podcast or like, get a review on something. Like we're just not at that place yet. So I think that's where I try to hold back, is to be like, okay, what's working? I don't want to lose sight of like new things that are coming, but at the same point, like I'd rather get you to a point where we got the basic fundamentals down working so good that we're at a point where like, okay, well, we need to expand our horizons. But like most companies are just not there yet. So that's more of the time I'm veering them away from like the shiny stuff and saying, do the fundamentals correct, and then we'll have that conversation.
You sound exactly like many business coaches to entrepreneurs that I know, which is like, put that down, come back here, sit, focus, dial in the fundamentals before you go off like shiny object.
Yeah, like if you're a company that fits the virtual events model, like you have a product that you should be educating people about. Like if you can't even run a successful webinar with over 500 people attending on a regular basis, why would you want to go do YouTube? Like you can't even like execute on a fundamental basic campaign. Like YouTube is, you're going to have a hell of a time at YouTube. Like if you can't,
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at, is like, get down the basic fundamentals of what works. Now, not events, live events are live events and virtual events. They don't work for every client. That's not, most clients aren't even at a stage where, in person, like, you got to be at a certain point. Virtual events, I even think some early stage startups, like it's not even worth it. They don't even have people to follow up on the leads, even if they had them, right? So just depending on where you are in the cycle, but you got to be smart.
So it sounds
especially
like,
because of the companies we work with, they have limited resources, right? So
right. Well, and ultimately, I mean, few people don't. Most people have limited resources. Most businesses have to choose. So your sounds like you can see that like a pitfall for some of your clients is like shiny object syndrome. Like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And you'd counsel, dial in the fundamentals, focus on nailing this. What are some of the other pitfalls you see your clients facing, and you're trying, what holes are you trying to keep them from stepping in?
I mean, I think we're in a really tough place when it comes to marketing right now. Like nobody can argue with me on this. And if they do, like they're nuts. But like it's really hard. Like paid media used to be able to like crush paid media for like a decent cost. Paid media prices are insane right now. Like, you used to get $1 or $2 downloads for something. Now it's like $9 or $10. Like,
wow.
So there's no way to do things cheap anymore. I mean, there just really isn't. So that's why you just got to be so smart about like where you spend your time and your money and your resources. And I think the biggest pitfall is just companies spend a lot of money on shitty content. Like they just stuff that they've done no like true research on. Like they really thought it through. They're just like, well, we need to do content marketing. We need to put up content. We need to do a webinar. It's like, but they're not thinking through like what webinar, like why are they doing this webinar? Who's it going to attend? Is it going to actually, is it going to get us to our outcome that we're looking to achieve? There's just like checking boxes. I think that's the hardest part.
Getting people to really hone in on, do you start, I mean, we often counsel our clients with an event to start from why, like why hold this? Why would they want to be there? Why an event, like why a live event and not a webinar? Or instead of it in that same vein of like this meeting could have been an email. Why, why put all this effort into gathering people? Make sure you're crystal clear on that. How do you help them uncover what that piece of content could be, and then how to frame it so that folks will want to show up?
Well, I mean, typically we just know it because we have data to kind of back it up. That's why we stick with like kind of the same, industries and client, because we can say that this works and this doesn't work because we've just tested it so many times. I think that's why we've had so much success as an agency, is keeping clients and retaining them, is just because we just stick to the same, industries. We just kind of know what works and what doesn't. But the other thing is, testing and so forth. And then, just to be fair, there's a lot of marketers that just have no idea how to word something. Well, that's just awful. Like, why? Nobody's going to sign up for that, right? So, I mean, there is some testing, and we don't know everything. We're not the agency that will come in and tell you that we know everything. But we've done so many of these virtual events that we can just kind of tell you, like, hey, just by an easy search on Twitter, is anybody talking about this? Like Twitter, for example, like, is anybody talking about this on LinkedIn? Like I have a great pulse on LinkedIn and what people are talking about in the certain industries that we work with. I just know what works and what doesn't a lot of times. And if I don't know, we do enough research to at least give our opinion.
Mm-hmm. So they can trust you to give them really quality feedback. Don't do this. Don't do this. And then it sounds like once you're getting like your client who's able to spin up a webinar a day effectively, they probably have a built-in research tool right there. If they're engaging those attendees, what are your biggest problems? What are you guys trying to solve?
Exactly, 100%.
Then
surveys
becomes a machine for getting new ideas for what they could be teaching, what they could be sharing.
Yeah, I mean, like when we used to work with you guys, as soon as the event was over, the live event, like a survey went out. Hey, what were the topics you didn't like?
People are still having a beer on the show floor. They're filling out that survey.
Who was your favorite speaker? What was your favorite topic? I mean, all of that, you just hone that in. Virtual events, it's a lot easier to do that, right? Because you can, Zoom's got that built into their platform now. But
absolutely,
yeah, I mean, a lot of times you just have that enough of those surveys, like you start to get it. And also, like, I think the other thing is you have to keep your own pulse, right? You have to like watch what people are talking about on LinkedIn. Like as an agency owner, like I spend hours, people, oh my God, you spend so much time on social media. It's like, well, but I don't even like social media anymore. Like I'm just there because I know I have to be, like,
but it's like it's your everything. It would be your Gartner group data and the New York Times for you. Like it's everything.
Yeah, I'm annoyed by half the people I follow, but I just, I'm doing that. Like, I'm doing that because I understand that these people have like got the voice of a lot of the customers that our clients are looking for. So like, do I follow them on LinkedIn because I want to hear that their stories? No, I don't actually want to hear it, but I just know that like that's a big piece because a lot of our clients aren't, they don't have that time, or I don't know if I'd say time. They probably do have time. They just don't want to make time for that. It's just not like on their radar. So they're kind of just relying on us for that.
That's super valuable too. Okay, I have. You're making me split apart my final question here. So I'm going to ask it in two phases. Since you're like, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. Sounds like you don't like. You're like, I'm just there, even if it's like aggravating me.
I still love it. I think I've just been doing it so long now.
It's exhausting. It's all exhausting. I mean, you're also like you are suffering the same as the folks that you're trying to reach. Like you said, there's so much noise. It's hard out there to like separate out.
Well, I think that's
from the noise.
To your point earlier. Like I think that's the hardest part now is to be completely honest with clients and say it's hard.
Yes.
Like I have no magic wand. I have no, I have a lot of experience. I have a lot of clients under my belt that we've had success with, but like it gets harder every day. Like to build a brand, to get people to sign up for something, like, and so you just, they get excitement, especially new founders, like they're really excited. They think they've got something that's so special that everybody's gonna want, and like you kind of have to just say like, well, you have what 50 other people are already selling. Not to say that this can't work, but you almost like you just have to. It's hard to like dial people back to reality.
Well, and it sounds to me like in 5 or 6 short years, of which the pandemic has been a big part, the space, all our spaces, like but especially online, have just become so saturated with noise and very little signal. So to do something, you mentioned Max Altschuler earlier, who built something incredible, in a relatively short period of time, was able to hone that message and deliver something that like people went to over and over and over again. Could he be successful doing that if he were starting today? Or is it just
great point. I mean, I don't know. I don't think he would have the success that he had when he had it. Did you work with Max too?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay,
I mean, we're like, oh, small world, right?
Yeah.
We knew each other from Max.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, okay.
A ton of admiration for him and what he built, and love when it kind of comes back around when he comes up. I was gonna say, and Max comes to mind, of course, but like somebody that whose message you actually admire on LinkedIn, if you can think of anybody. They all suck.
That's a great question. I kind of like following people like Noah Kagan. He sumo, I think he's like
Was it
sumome.com.
AppSumo?
AppSumo, yeah, AppSumo, yeah.
AppSumo, yeah.
And like, I kind of like admire kind of guys like him in a weird way, because they're founders and then they're content creators, like Patrick Bet David, from he's got something value entertainment. I like these entrepreneurial guys that are kind of like turned into like content creators, where they just have intriguing conversations with other kind of entrepreneurs or other. Yeah, I find that to be kind of interesting. I'm less about like the tactical stuff like I used to be, because I feel like a lot of it's just regurgitated. I kind of like more of the high level founders kind of talking about bigger picture stuff, that
Inspiration
kind of
or thought leadership stuff, or industry, I don't want to say trends, industry outlook, as opposed to like 3 tips for yeah. Cool. And how about somebody just in your broader professional interactions that you admire offline? An offline admiration.
I work with a founder who's very intriguing. He's started was an NFT sports company for college athletics.
Oh my God, NFT is going to be a dirty word soon, but yeah.
Yeah, no, well, and no. So what I'll say is that, he's been fun to work with because I've watched him pivot the business. So I've seen like a young founder take a really hot industry and then watch it change and then evolve it into something else. And I think that's really cool for me. Like, which is something I'm sure you had to do with COVID, right? Like, in-person events went away. It's like you had to
watching somebody be like elastic and nimble enough and then get traction with the next thing is super compelling.
Yeah, it's interesting because entrepreneurism, is scary. Like, right? I mean, like you were doing in person and then COVID hit, and it's like, the government essentially took away your right to do business one day. Now, granted, it could be the pandemic's fault too, but whatever. We could, that argument can go either way. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it was your business. And
at the end of the day, in person was not happening. Happening.
It was just not happening. Yeah. And, you had 2 options. What, you either close up shop or you evolve and change. And I always admire that. I mean, that's happening in the world that we're living in, right? It's like,
well, in our event, in the event industry, if you speak to anybody who ran an agency like ours or any of our vendors, there were truly 2 paths, like hide, or if you had the resources or the personal or professional cushion, like just go dormant, right? Like I'm going offline for a while. I'm going, I know somebody who ran an incredibly successful business here in the Bay Area. And after a few weeks of like, we're going to shift, we're going to expand, we're going to shift, we're going to expand, it was like, I will be mountain biking for a few weeks. And then I will be spending a lot of time with my children. And then, and there were many times when I was like, can I just go to sleep and somebody wake me up when this is over? And say that out loud and then be like, no, I can't actually do that. Okay. We will instead like expand and explore. And, I hate the word pivot after all that, shift into new territory. And I think when it's really encouraging, admirable, and reassuring when you can see somebody else do that, even if it's not in like a global emergency, but just NFTs are changing. Like, will they be viable? Or, were they a flash in the pan? And what will you do? So that's a really good example. I like it a lot.
Yeah. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, when the market takes something away from you, whether you can, a lot of times you can't control the things that happen really fast. Yeah. So, but you have livelihoods, you have people's salaries. I mean, my wife and I both work in this business. So like if something happens in the business, like we lose an entire income, right? So
it hits both of you. And it turns out we're living in the real world. And we can neither hibernate nor just, opt out.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, I wish it would be easier if I was in a financial position to do that, but I'm not quite there yet.
No, but I think you gave me a lot of really good. I'm like, I want to end on a high note here. Something you are looking forward to heading into the holiday or the new year, something bright and shiny. Your children, for instance.
Yeah, I mean,
shiny.
this is the first year where we're gonna like be home and then have like all of our family come here, so that'll be fun.
Oh,
Usually
nice.
we like travel to like other family, so we get to spend it home with family. So I'm just looking forward to that. I'm just looking forward to like not thinking about marketing for 4 or 5 days will be great.
Yep. A small breather and a chance to refresh and reset.
Yeah, and
Oh.
unfortunately, my clients are not taking their foot off the gas right now. So
Right. Yeah. They're just going to like drive right through the goalposts that mark the end of the year. They don't just go,
yeah,
yeah, I feel you.
yeah. But
So
that's okay. I'm just thankful that we have clients, so right.
that's right. Yeah, that's right. Well, thanks so much, Jack. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. And I've enjoyed talking with, this has been Jack Kosakowski, CEO of Creation Agency.
Thanks for listening to the Kennedy Events Podcast. Come back next time and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.